on stage? Yep. How about another round of applause for the amazing writer-director of this film? So my first question is essentially what inspired you to tell this particular story?
So first of all, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks to all of you. Thank you everybody for coming out in ever uncertain times to see this film. I really appreciate it. I think I was inspired to tell this film because of a very illuminating interaction that I had. So once upon a time, I had a master myself, which, similar, you guys know the deal. I went to Yale, and I went to Yale when there still were masters who were referred as such. And I ran into my master, who's a really lovely guy, but I ran into him several years after graduating in New York City, and I was excited to see him. And I excitedly greeted him by name, which starts with master, just fully on the streets of New York. And I just watched the color drain from his face immediately. This older white man definitely did not want to be loudly referred to as master in public in that kind of way. And it almost felt like this dirty little secret that had been, going on. And that's when, the full weight of the title and the name and the word really hit me, because for most of my life, as a college student, it was really normal. And it really stayed with me. And that very day, I just remember, walking away and thinking, what the hell? What has been going on, and what has been going on with me, and what else have I kind of just been going along with? So I found it really powerful, and I told myself I'm going to write a film called Master, and I'm going to, that was the first thing that I knew, and I loved all of the different, definitions that you could apply to the word, and then I started thinking about the character, and I thought, okay, I wanna follow a Black woman who's just been named Master.
And then as you were kind of crafting, I guess, your main character, Master, did the person that you initially wrote end up being the person you put on screen, I guess?
In some ways, yes, but in other ways, no. And I think that it changed a little bit in the writing process, and then also, in collaboration with Regina and just everything that Regina brought to the role and the character. But the earlier versions of Gail were much more severe as a person and a character, while, still having this desire to, reach out and connect and help Jasmine. She's a little bit more tense and, kind of disconnected from herself. And I had I was watching a lot of Michael Haneke at the time, and I was like, oh, the piano teacher, oh, this is perfect, and, obviously that's not, thankfully, I guess, that's not what I ended up with, although I love that film. That's just not what, that's not what Regina brings, and that's not, what the character ends up being. And it feels, like a very important element of her character, that there is this, this warmth and this, huge depth of empathy that Regina is able to portray.
Speaking of Regina, how did you get Regina for this project? I was very excited. I love Regina, so I was very excited to see her in this.
Yeah, I mean, I almost remain baffled to this day, because I had no business, knocking on Regina's door. But I was working with some amazing producers at Animal Kingdom, and they worked with me. We got the script to a place that felt really great, and then and Amazon actually came on after we sent the script around to a few places. And so, there is definitely some institutional support that allowed me to even, gain access to her. and we sent her the script, and I wrote her a 1-page letter that I toiled over, just trying to, make the case for why I thought she would be a brilliant Gale. And before I knew it, I was flying to LA and meeting her for lunch. It was crazy.
We talked a little bit about this upstairs, but I wanted to talk about like the filming process, because this was filmed during COVID, which definitely changed how the filming went for this movie.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's funny because a lot of times I say we started the film before COVID, but we started the film during COVID and we just didn't really realize that it was during COVID. Our first go around, our shoot went up in late February 2020. And, I was so intensely focused on the film and on all of the details that I was only paying half attention to the news, just reading headlines. So I was not prepared for everything that came afterwards. Even I remember the day that we ended up shutting down, my agent called me and he was like, "Hey, so how are you doing?" And I told him, "Great. We had our first overnight last night. It was really cold, but we got everything. It was really wonderful. We're going back in. We have another one tonight. I have a really good feeling." He kind of paused and he said, "Okay, so I guess you haven't had time to read the news." And, he told me, "Well, I'm just checking in, things seem to be escalating, but okay." And I said, "No, I think we're still going, it's going to be okay." And by the middle of that day, we had shut down, and we were on pause. Our production was on pause until January 2021. So almost a full year after when we had first begun. So that definitely threw a wrench in our plans. And I was very grateful that I hadn't cast any, like 5-year-olds or something like that, from like one scene to the next, the kid is like a foot taller or something. So I was glad, that we could disguise any sort of continuity, flubs in the film. And I'm just happy we finished, I felt, we had made it halfway through. So I felt very hopeful enough. I was like, they've spent too much money on this to just let it go. So I felt hopeful that we would be able to finish, and then we did.
Well, first I want to say I didn't start this properly. If you have any questions, you can walk to one of the mics on either side. So please don't be shy. So one of the things you mentioned was that you kind of started with the character of Master. Where did Jasmine's character kind of come into the process when you were thinking about what you wanted the film to be?
So Jasmine, Jasmine's journey is really interesting because her story was a very early element. I think that, I was thinking first of this, of the title and Master, and then Gale, and then I just thought about the environment, and I was thinking about, I transposed to kind of, the self delusion that none of this film had anything to do with my life. I was like, well, I'm not going to set this in Connecticut, so I'll just shift it over to Massachusetts and pretend like this is about an entirely different place and different person. And when I was thinking about the location and the town, I started thinking about Salem, and all of the events contained therein, and that's where some of the haunting and that element of the story came to me, and Jasmine followed soon after that. But in the first draft of the script, the story was told entirely through Gale's point of view. So the events occur more or less the way that they happen in the film, but our access to Jasmine is limited only through Gale's point of view. And every time I would, and that's the script that I took to my producers, and every time I would get notes from them, they kept on wanting more Jasmine, and I would kind of throw up my arms and say, how many more run-ins can I contrive, between this professor and student? Because that's the only way that we can get more Jasmine. And then I paused and realized, okay, actually, that's not the only way that, we can include more Jasmine. I can actually, follow her and go entirely into her inner world and into her perspective. So over the course of, a few months of when I was developing the script with them, I actually told them, when I came to that realization, I told them, okay, hang on, I've got it. I'll be back. See you in a couple of months. And I went away and I rewrote the film basically, with a lot of the same stuff, but really started again, and went back and forth between those two characters.
You mentioned a bit about having Salem kind of lead you towards the supernatural elements. Kind of wanted to talk to you about like, did you know that you were always going to kind of have a story that like explored stuff beyond like the physical, or were you kind of like, what was your thought process? Like, were you planning to make a straight drama initially, or was this meant to be always a kind of a bit more, I guess, a genre film? I don't want to say anything else, it's a genre film.
Yeah, I think that the horror aspect of the story was there very, very early. For me, even just the process of, after this chance encounter with my master, the process of going back into my memories and, my personal history, and looking at a lot of the aspects of being, a student in a place like that, a lot of stuff that I had repressed and like really ignored in order to get through the experience. Revisiting that and reliving that was, horrific. Yeah. And the space and the memories and the story of the character all lent itself to this horror, this horror atmosphere. And I wanted to make a film that kind of replicated the emotional experience of the characters, aesthetically, and tonally as well. So it was a very early element of the film.
And it's done really well. It's like, there's this feeling of dread as you're navigating parts of the film. And I want to commend you on your ability to create that, because sometimes that's really hard to do in a film.
Thank you.
I guess my next question, I just want to make sure that if anyone has any questions, you can definitely ask them. It doesn't have to just be me and my voice. My next question is kind of what's a moment, I guess, moving away from like the structural thing, what's a moment when you were shooting, either before the COVID or after the COVID, where you like a sense of joy, or just like knowing that you're making the right film, or just feeling like on the right path when you're making the movie?
The funniest and saddest example of that is the day before we got shut down. We were up at Vassar, which is where we shot a lot of the campus exteriors. And Regina came up to me, in a moment between scenes, and she just expressed really beautifully. She just said to me, Mariama, I think you're doing a really great job, and I think that you've really got something really special here, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. She just said some really encouraging, really kind words, and then went away. And I remember thinking to myself, this couldn't be going better. And then the next day, I was on my way back to New York City, which I wasn't sure would be an apocalyptic hellscape or what was going on down there while we were gone. So it was a startling reversal for sure.
Oh, well, I mean, you were on the right track. The universe just wasn't.
Yeah.
You can ask from there. It's fine. I'll repeat the question after you say it.
I was really curious about the character of Liv. I think it gave me like a Rachel Dolezal deja vu. And I was really curious about your inspiration for that, and like what writing that character and maybe like nuancing proximity to blackness or whiteness like meant to you within the context of the film. I thought that like quote about like you guys can't even differentiate between black and white was so memorable and really interesting. And so that was really like, I'm still going over it in my brain, and I'd love to hear your inspiration for that.
So I'm just going to repeat the question. They wanted to know a little bit more about the character of Liz and that duality about closeness to whiteness and blackness in a character.
Yes. So thank you for that question. Liv is a very funny character to me. And I think that, I hope to leave it a little bit open to interpretation, you know, who is telling the truth about her identity. But even, you know, beyond that, I think that, you know, between Jasmine, Gail, and Liv is the character of those three who I think is most actively participating in her identity and is kind of the most savvy about how race is understood and consumed at Ancaster. And I think that, you know, she tries to get out ahead of it a little bit and you know, commodify it and wield it in certain instances. And I think that that's something that, you know, I've seen happen and doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, a nefarious actor who might be completely lying about their history, but there is, you know, there's this demand that, you know, an institution like that, that's, you know, only engaging superficially with diversity, you know, it kind of places demands on people and everyone kind of responds in a different way. And so to kind of exploit your own identity and move in the world in that way, I think is something that Liv is doing, you know, throughout the film.
I think this will probably be our last question. Okay, we're good. Then we're fine.
I thought the film was so wonderful. And
Thank you.
Of course. And I was really struck by the increasing isolation of Jasmine, which I'm sure was intentional, but it kind of made me think about filming during COVID also. And was there anything that kind of happened or that you discovered about these characters that only happened because you had to navigate filming during a pandemic?
Thank you for that question. I think that's a really interesting question. You know, Jasmine's increasing isolation and the way that she's pictured wasn't an outcome of COVID, but there are things that shifted because of you know, the protocols that we had to follow. I am ever the optimist, so I felt like some of the changes that we made or that we had to make were for the positive. There are a few. One of them is the scene that takes place, the memorial for Jasmine after she dies, that takes place outside with the candles and at night, was originally supposed to be indoors in the Belleville common room, which like, I don't even like, that's not visually engaging. I just wrote it, to me, like logically, that's where it would have been. And they would have been like in more of like an assembly room. But when it was, you know, when we went back and we had to shoot that during COVID, there were, you know, limitations on how many background we could get into one space maskless, you know, and they tried, our COVID officers, you know, presented me with a menu of options, all of them bad, you know, it'd be like, one of them was, maybe the characters wear masks. It's like halfway through this film with like no commentary, they're just gonna start wearing masks, like no. So instead, I set it outside, which I was very glad to have done. And I think that scene is, you know, really visually arresting. I like it, at least. So that's one. We actually lost two of our actors, unfortunately, who were in the first part of the film, but could not come back for the second. Both of them are on a television show. They're on the same show. And when it was time to return, they were like quarantined. Basically, they were locked down in Atlanta and they couldn't go back and forth for another project, which was unfortunate. But we got two other amazing actors in their stead. So those were some of the changes. And it was, yeah, I would say that those are the biggest ones. I'm trying to think of another, but it was definitely, you know, a period of trying to adjust. And, but it did buy me some time, you know, to think about how to, you know, how to kind of tweak things and add some things in. And, you know, there was an influx of cash because we had to increase our budget to to account for the COVID costs, and then some of that money worked its way into like other departments, which I was very glad to see. Thank you.
And this is the,
Yeah.
oh, okay, so there and there.
All right. I guess I'll go first. Hi. First, I just want to congratulate you on making a movie that was really good and like wonderful to watch.
Thank you.
So good job. I just want to commend you on that. And then I also just wanted to ask, first, just what were your inspirations, and also why did you choose to screen this movie at Athena Film Festival?
Oh, thank you. Okay, great. So, thanks so much. My inspiration. So there are a lot of classic horror films that were definitely, films that I kept on returning to while I was heading into making this film. The Shining was one. Don't Look Now was another. Rosemary's Baby. I was, Michael Haneke kick, like very strong. I was Cachet, The White Ribbon, also Let the Right One In, the original film. So there were a lot of films that I was just kind of, vibing to and enjoying and feeling inspired by as I was, thinking about how I would visualize this story. And, I was a little bit intimidated to come to the Athena Film Festival, actually, because you guys, this is kind of part of your world. I want to do, this sort of, the academic, that world justice, and not do the dumb Hollywood version of, academia and all of that. And so, it was on the one hand daunting to present it before an audience made up in part of, Barnard students, but also just something that I was incredibly excited by. And of course, the focus on women, like, how could I not?
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And then here.
Hi there. Oh, that's very loud. Thank you so much for sharing this film. It was wonderful. I had two questions. One is, what audience did you have in mind while you were writing this film? And on top of that question, how did you balance storytelling with the didactic potential of a film like this about a minority experience?
Thank you for that's a really good question. I did not write this film with an audience in mind. This was therapy for me. I just needed to exercise some things, and I needed to process some stuff. And I really kind of just got grabbed by Gail's story and swept along. And I was more so focusing on, portraying that as honestly as I could. And as well as for Jasmine, and the other women, and just really telling a story, as authentically as I could. If I had, paused, it wasn't even necessarily an intentional thing. That's just what was being demanded of me. If I had thought about it a little bit, I probably would have talked myself out of a few things. But I just really wasn't thinking about that at all. I don't know how I did. Maybe I didn't balance the story and the didactic qualities. I was never trying to, I was really never really trying to teach anything or instruct or really leave any kind of lesson or anything like that. I think I was trying to illuminate an experience, and I was trying to render something that was so emotionally powerful for me. Render it in a way that somebody outside of myself could access it and have a their own emotional experience with it. But that was basically where my focus was. And I think that my personality nevertheless may have come across in this kind of recent college, like Lisa Simpson kind of thing, where I have a lot to say. My still was in there, but that's just that's just who I was at the time of writing it, and everything that had to come out of me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for your amazing questions, and thank you for being here for your amazing film.
Thank you guys so much.